advisories across the country. But I can see that my time is nearly up, and so with that, Madam Speaker, thank you.
The honourable member will have 4 minutes and 50 seconds after the questions and the question period. Statements by members. The honourable member for Richmond, Steveston, Richmond East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on Saturday, April the 21st, I attended the celebration of life at South Arm United Church for Lois Carson Boyce, who passed away at the age of 99 years young. Lois was a proud member of the Royal Canadian Air Force during World War II, before dedicating her life to the peace movement, the environment, seniors issues, and the cause of social justice. Her volunteer work earned her many awards, including the prestigious Golden Jubilee Medal, the Richmond Chamber of Commerce Community Service Award, and the Ethel Tibbetts Award, in recognition of her contributions as a Richmond pioneer. Lois dedicated her life to Richmond and making it a better place. Madam Speaker, she will truly be missed.
The honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Speaker, today is the beginning of June, and it's also the beginning of Scleroderma Awareness Month. Scleroderma is a progressive and chronic connective tissue disorder that can attack one's internal organs, literally shutting them down one by one, and can also cause weeping ulcers, skin deterioration, and Raynaud's disease, amongst other symptoms. As many in this House already know, I had to watch my mother suffer the awful effects that scleroderma brings, and that eventually took her life. It was one of the most heart-wrenching experiences of my life. Unfortunately, my mother was just one of many women to be afflicted of scleroderma, as almost 80% of sufferers are women, and most are diagnosed between the ages of 30 and 50. We still aren't sure what causes scleroderma, but what we do know is the number of diagnoses are on the rise. Speaker, research on new therapeutic measures has been promising, but much more is needed. We need more funding to drive this research to find a cure and stem the tide of this horrid disease. We can and must assure the men and women suffering that the Government of Canada is in their corner.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Madam Speaker, I was honoured to cut the ribbon at the opening of Algonquin College's new Discovery, Applied Research and Entrepreneurship Building and Centre for Indigenous Entrepreneurship District, or DARE. It will include the college's new library, learning centre, and Indigenous Commons, as well as a cybersecurity centre, making it, as forward-thinking college president Cheryl Jensen would say, a truly collaboratory space. It
will also include new training and evaluation facilities for jobs in high demand, a multimedia production centre, an expansion of applied research, innovation programs, and a dedicated space for Indigenous entrepreneurship.
$21.9 million through our post-secondary institutions strategic investment fund, continuing our goal to make every Canadian innovation ready, meaning ready to discover new ideas, spot opportunities, and imagine new possibilities. The DARE district is where we can all dare to dream. Thank you.
The honourable member for Mississippi Churchill River.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to congratulate two groups from Northern Saskatchewan who will be receiving the Prairies Action Foundation Youth Leadership Award in Regina next week. The Clearwater River Youth Project venture teaches young people the values of culture, teamwork, and communication. Their programming strengthens the youth's connection to each other, the land, their culture, and their community. Congratulations to all involved. Second, the WE Schools group at Hudson Bay Community School in Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan. Led by Leanne Borowitz, students work together on a variety of projects, including a fundraising effort for the Hudson Bay Hospital. These young people showed us all together we have the ability to make positive change in our communities regardless of how old we are. I very much look forward to meeting both groups next week as they receive their awards. Thank you.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Madam Speaker, building bridges in the community means building a healthy, harmonious, respectful, and tolerant place. Building bridges is the inclusive and inspiring theme for the 50th anniversary of the foundation of the city of Blainville on June 29th. This young city has a centuries-old history because As a matter of fact, Blainville came out of the seigneurie of soldier Jean-Baptiste Céléron de Blainville, who died in combat in 1756. With its long past but young spirit, Blainville is one of the 5 best cities in Canada to raise children, and I have the honour of representing the people of Blainville here in Parliament. I'm proud, and I invite members to celebrate this anniversary of Blainville, which advocates and inspires the best values in Canadian society. Happy birthday to all the residents of Blainville. Happy 50th anniversary. The honourable member for Beauport-Côte de Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. National Victims of Crime Week is coming to an end, and unfortunately, nothing significant coming from this government to advance the rights of victims. In fact, they've done nothing since they came to power. That's a pretty shabby showing for a government that bills itself egalitarian and feminist. Unfortunately, the legislation on human trafficking and sexual exploitation is still not in force. There are judge positions that are still vacant, as is the position of the Victims of Crime Ombudsman, and has been for 7 months. The Liberals have refused to protect this position, which was an official voice in Parliament for victims, because they voted against my bill, which would have protected the position by making it permanent and arm's length, just like the correctional investigator position. That would have been a decisive step towards equality for victims of crime. And with the theme of transforming the culture, it seems to me that for this to make sense, the Liberal government should first transform its own internal culture. The honourable member for Longueuil-Charlemagne. Madam Speaker, as we celebrate Tourism Week in Canada, I'm very proud to invite you to the first edition of RibFest South Shore Montreal, a new festival this weekend in my riding of Longueuil-Charlemagne.
Starting today, barbecue lovers are invited to Greenfield Park to enjoy some of the best ribs in town, along with great music, entertainment, and fun for the whole family as we kick off summer in style. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to judge the competition. That will determine which ribber will be the winner of this year's South Shore Montreal Rib Fest. Madam Speaker, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. Je suis persuadée.
I'm sure RibFest South Shore Montreal will be a big hit and will become a must in the region. I'm sure it'll be finger-licking good. Yum.
Have you joined with you?
The honourable member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Madam Speaker, Canada has been hit with punitive tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. These American tariffs are unacceptable. My riding of Sault Ste. Marie is a steel town and a border town. We have a long history of trade and friendship with our American neighbors across the St. Mary's River. Within a few hours of this announcement yesterday by the U.S. administration, our Prime Minister responded swiftly and forcefully to stand up for our steel and aluminum industries. I could not agree more with the Prime Minister that Canada could be considered a national security threat to the United States is inconceivable. As we have said, we will always stand up for our workers, and we have announced retaliatory measures to this attack on our industry. Canada will impose tariffs against imports of steel, aluminum, and other products from the U.S. We are imposing dollar-for-dollar tariffs for every dollar levied against Canadians by the U.S. This House should stand together and fight against these unfair tariffs. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
The Prime Minister has no credibility when it comes to electoral reform. During the last election, he promised reform, but as soon as he realized he wouldn't get the result he wanted, he broke his promise. Now he has introduced reforms designed to give the Liberal government an advantage over opposition parties. The Liberals have introduced severe restrictions on political party spending before an election, but they have conveniently neglected to restrict their ability to shower government largesse across the country at the same time. They are tilting the playing field in their own favor. This bill fails to tackle the issue of foreign-funded third-party groups that undermined Canadian democracy in 2015. You have to wonder if the government is leaving giant loopholes in this bill because they want third parties to continue undermining Canada's interests, or is it just another case of Liberal incompetence? I call on the Prime Minister to stop limiting debate and to work with opposition parties to create the best legislation for Canadians.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Madam Speaker, cycling is good for our communities. It's a healthy, pollution-free and fun way to get around. But too many people avoid cycling because they're afraid for their safety. And too many cyclists are injured or killed. What we need to do is do more to make sure cyclists are safe. Drivers, slow down and be aware. Give cyclists a minimum of 1 meter of space when passing them. The Ontario coroner found that the leading cause of death or injury was in fact not giving that space. When you're turning right, signal, check your blind spot. There might be a cyclist right to the right of you and planning to go straight through that intersection. Stay off your phone. The message or text is not worth a life. And if you need to take that call, park, but not in a bike lane. When you park, use the Dutch reach. That means you use your right hand and you turn back when you're opening that door. That way you can see if a bike is there. And let's build safe streets, Madam Speaker. Together, we can make sure that cyclists are safe. Thank you.
Well done. The honourable member for Ottawa South.
Madam Speaker, St. Thomas the Apostle Nursery School is a non-denominational, multicultural, community-based school located in Alta Vista in the heart of my riding of Ottawa South. I am honoured to rise in the House today to congratulate them on 50 years of service to thousands and thousands of local families. Their mission is to help children acquire a positive attitude towards school and learning, and they achieve this by providing a warm and nurturing learning environment where children can explore and experiment to develop a feeling of self-worth and independence. Thank you. Thank you to all the staff, the volunteers, the parents, and the Board of Directors for their dedication over the last half-century. I know all members will want to join me in congratulating the St. Thomas the Apostle Nursery School on this incredible milestone and wish them every success for the next 50 years. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
All he wants to do is help people and make them feel good with his hugs. There's no better way to describe Barrie resident and my friend Jason Nicholas Hellman. Jason is an incredible young man who volunteers countless hours and raises, well, pretty crazy amounts of money for charities in Barrie. There's not enough time, Madam Speaker, in 1 minute to tell Canadians about the numerous causes Jason has been part of, but the cause closest to Jason's heart is the Terry Fox Foundation. Jason loves Terry's spirit and determination, which is why he started Raisers of Hope. Over the past 3 years, Jason has shaved his head along with Colin McDonald and has raised a total of $11,450 for the Terry Fox Foundation. Whether it's raising money, volunteering, or participating in the MS Bike Tours, the Polar Plunge for Special Olympics, helping out with Barrie's Out of the Cold program, or being a peer rep for the local Down syndrome group for Simcoe County, like Terry, Jason represents the best of what it means to be Canadian.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize the too soon passing of Ron Hanlon, a champion for the great city of Halifax. As CEO of the Halifax Partnership, the city's economic development agency, he was a tireless promoter of our city's potential. His leadership on the creation of the Halifax Economic Growth Plan has positioned our city to become what Haligonians know it can be, one of the world's greatest 21st century cities. Ron was a man of great personal integrity and ambition. He returned to Halifax to spend the remainder of his career in public service to his hometown after an impressive business career overseas. Ron notably developed the Sell Halifax plan, which has successfully promoted Halifax globally to attract immigrants, investment, and business. It was my pleasure to have worked with Ron on the future of our city and how we can best position Halifax and indeed all of Nova Scotia for success. I would like to express my deepest condolences to Ron's wife, Greta, and his entire family. Though no one will miss him more than his family, all of Halifax will miss him too. Thanks for everything, Ron.
The honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Madam Speaker, the Relay for Life fundraiser for the Canadian Cancer Society is underway in the Sur-Roi area. Individuals and groups march and relay to raise funds to fight all kinds of cancer. The route is lined with lanterns and hope-inspiring activities and remembrance of the departed. The first, in 2018, took place in Pincourt and raised $207,000. The next will be in Salaberry de Valleyfield on June 2nd in Delta Sauvé Park. The sponsor of the event is Steve Sauvé. The idea is to support prevention and research and improve services to patients and families. I'd like to thank all the organizers, volunteers, and marchers, and I encourage everyone to take part by buying a lantern or by marching, because it's a night to make a difference. And I'm thinking of my sister, who's a survivor and has been involved in the cause for 4 years. Thank you to everyone.
For Kitchener-Conestoga.
Madam Speaker, the safety of Canadians should be the #1 priority of our government. A strong criminal justice system must always put the rights of victims and communities before special treatment of violent criminals. Reducing penalties for serious crimes sends a wrong message to victims, law-abiding Canadians, and to criminals. The Liberals' proposal to eliminate consecutive sentences for human trafficking is a huge mistake that will have devastating consequences. The Liberals earlier committed to keeping full protections in place for religious officials under Section 176 of the Criminal Code, but are now removing it in C-75. Assault on officiants during a religious service is very serious and must remain an indictable offence. We have major concerns with many other elements of the bill. Later sentencing, such as fines for what are very serious crimes, including participating in the activity of a terrorist group, infanticide, concealing the body of a child, impaired driving offences causing bodily harm, and advocating genocide. Madam Speaker, it's time for the Liberals to put victims ahead of criminals. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Whitby.
Madam Speaker, today I rise with great enthusiasm to answer a question that many of my constituents have. Where's Brooklyn at? Well, Madam Speaker, let me assure you that Brooklyn is in the House. For the past 107 years, the Brooklyn Spring Fair has been the can't-miss event for Whitby, Ashburn, Myrtle, and of course, Brooklyn. I want to thank the Brooklyn Agricultural Society, who were busy as bees making sure that the grand opening was perfect last night. From dressing up for the parade to checking out the livestock and farm exhibits at Agriland to having a thrill on the Midway or kicking back and listening to great live music, there is something for everyone in Brooklyn. But Madam Speaker, I do have a little bit of sad news. As a 3-time pie-eating champion, I want to let everyone know that I will not be participating in the contest this year, and I'll be retiring from pie eating. And while I know that this is disappointing, I will assure you that you will not be disappointed in the festivities in Brooklyn during this final weekend of Tourism Week. I invite everyone to come to the Brooklyn Spring Fair, and I look forward to seeing you all at the parade tomorrow morning.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Canadians woke up this morning to the reality that we are in a trade war with our friend and closest ally, the United States. This trade war isn't good for anyone, and the consequences will be severe. The Prime Minister knew that President Trump might do this, and so it could not have come as a shock. Although retaliatory measures are appropriate, they alone will not solve the impasse. So just how does the government plan on getting things back on track with our friend and closest ally south of the border?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to start by thanking the countless Canadians who have come out in support of our strong plan to defend Canadian steel and aluminum workers. And I'd like to particularly thank former Conservative ministers Rona Ambrose and James Moore and former Premier Brad Wall. This is a matter of the national interest. I'd like to thank Jason Kenney, who yesterday said, and I quote, that he strongly supports the federal government's swift announcement of retaliatory measures. And let me say this directly to all Canadian workers. Team Canada is behind you.
The Honourable Member, Official Opposition House Leader.
Madam Speaker, just weeks ago, the Prime Minister went on what actually looked like a premature victory tour lap of steel mills, prematurely telling workers that he had to deal with Trump when clearly he didn't. He had to have known how risky that was and that it just wasn't true. Today, Madam Speaker, steel towns across the country are worried. They're concerned. What is the government going to do to mitigate the pain that this trade war with the U.S. will inflict on our steel and aluminum workers?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, let me be clear. The tariffs imposed yesterday by the United States on steel and aluminum are completely unacceptable, and in fact, they are illegal. I want to assure all Canadians that we are taking strong, responsive measures to defend our workers and our industry. We will today be challenging these illegal U.S. measures at the WTO and under NAFTA. And again, I want to say directly to our workers, the Government of Canada, and I believe the vast majority of Canadians are totally with you.
Yeah. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
The problem, Madam Speaker, is there were no plans built into the Liberal budget to deal with an unpredictable U.S. administration. It's like the Liberals naively thought there'd be no impact on Canadians because of this unpredictability, and so they didn't prepare for it. This morning, Canadian workers are worried. They're seeing tariffs that will hurt them and the beginning of a trade war. Why are steel and aluminum workers and their families going to have to suffer because the Liberal government failed to prepare for what we are seeing happen right now?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, let me assure this House and all Canadians that from the very beginning, this government has been absolutely prepared for any possible action from the U.S. We have said from the outset that we hope for the best and we prepare for the worst. That is why yesterday we were able to publish a very comprehensive set of lists which Canadians now have the opportunity to consult on. And let me take this opportunity to thank our outstanding public servants in trade who have been working on this list for many, many weeks.
Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, you reap what you sow. Liberal ineptitude is leading to one disaster after another. A trade war with our most important trade partner is not good for our economy. Canadians need a concrete plan that goes beyond words. Mr. Speaker, our steel and aluminum workers need now more than ever support from this government. What is the plan for workers in communities like in Saguenay? The Honourable Minister for Global Affairs. Madam Speaker, the tariffs imposed yesterday by the United States on steel and aluminum are completely unacceptable and illegal. I want to assure all Canadians that we will take strong measures to defend our workers. And today, we will be challenging these illegal measures at the WTO and under NAFTA. And to all Canadian workers, I say Canada and our government is behind you.
Député de Lévis-Lotbinière.
Madame la Présidente, Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, it has been a difficult week for Canadian taxpayers. The decision to fund Trans Mountain and a trade war with the Americans will cost us very dearly. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister is leading Canadians to the edge of an abyss and asking them to follow him blindly. When will he do the right thing and come up with a plan for steel and aluminum workers for communities, in communities like that of Saguenay? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, I would like to start by thanking all those Canadians who supported our plan to defend workers, including former Conservative ministers Rona Ambrose and James Moore and Brad Wall. I would also like to thank Jason Kenney, who said yesterday that he firmly supports the quick response on the part of the federal government for retaliatory measures. To all workers, our government is behind you.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
146,000 Canadian and steel and aluminum workers woke up today worried about their future and their families. They support the government's retaliatory tariffs against Donald Trump, but they know that alone won't save their jobs. They also don't know why the Liberals are waiting a whole month to hit back when Mexico and the EU acted right away. Standing up to a bully is the right thing to do. But if you're going to punch back, you don't wait 30 days to do it. Why is this government delaying retaliatory action when workers are under attack now?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, let me start by thanking the Honourable Member for her hard work on this file. She and I have been in close contact on this, and it has been a really productive partnership. Canada did respond immediately yesterday we are imposing dollar-for-dollar tariffs against products from the United States. It is absolutely prudent for us to take a bit of time to consult to ensure that this list is the right one for Canada. And I'd like to thank the Canadian Labour Congress and Canadian workers for their support.
The honourable member for Essex.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister called Jagmeet Singh to discuss these tariffs. The NDP leader gave his support for retaliatory tariffs, but urged the Prime Minister not to forget about the workers affected. Too often in a trade war, it's the workers who pay the price. So what will this government do to protect workers and their communities, like Saguenay, Sault Ste. Marie, Regina, Edmonton, Kitimat, Hamilton, and my riding of Essex? Will this government sit down with labour and industry immediately and put together a package that supports workers, protects their jobs, and defends their communities?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Madam Speaker, our government has been throughout and again this week and yesterday in very close contact with workers and with businesses in the steel and aluminum sectors. That is why we were able to put forward such a strong and immediate response. And I do want to underscore the very productive collaboration with Canadian unions. I'd like to quote what the CLC had to say. Canada's unions fully support Canada's retaliation against the unjustified and unwarranted American tariffs on steel and aluminum. I couldn't have said it better myself.
The honourable member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Madam Speaker, yesterday's decision by the Trump administration to impose potentially catastrophic tariffs against our steel industries is completely unfair and misguided. We absolutely agree with the government on that. More than 8,000 directly related jobs and 20,000 indirect jobs depend on the aluminum industry in areas like Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. Workers are worried and they're wondering how they will recover from this crisis. What is the term in the coming days from the government to protect steel and aluminum workers? The honourable member for Foreign Affairs. Madam Speaker, I absolutely agree with my colleague that the United States decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum is absolutely unacceptable and it's illegal. In response, we have announced a solid plan to defend our industry and its workers. Unions and workers are with us, with Canada. And I am going to quote the CLC and the head of the unions who said that they fully support our retaliatory measures. The honourable member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Madam Speaker, we're talking about 150,000 jobs that are at stake in both these sectors. That is a very high number, 150,000 jobs. These workers have already gone through months of threats on the part of Donald Trump, and they've had enough of being treated like common currency. The time has come to work together to get through this crisis. Will the government announce a program to protect workers who are affected, for example, by offering them subsidies, loan guarantees, or loans? We'd like some details. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Madam Speaker, I want to underscore the fact that these tariffs are absolutely unacceptable and that we will take strong steps to defend our industry and our workers. Canada will impose restrictive trade measures for American imports up to $16.6 billion. That is a strong response on the part of Canada and a reciprocal response to a bad decision on the part of the United States.
Water Lakes Brox.
Speaker, the Prime Minister flippantly equates Energy East and the 15,000 jobs it would have created and the $55 billion it would have injected into the Canadian economy as old news. Atlantic Canadians don't think creating good-paying jobs that keep families together and close to home as old news. The General Electric employees in Peterborough who lost their jobs when the Liberals killed Energy East don't think unemployment is old news. Right. Can the Prime Minister explain to Canadians why he is picking winners and losers in the energy sector?
The Honourable Minister, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will once again say that that is an absurd comparison. Suggesting political interference was somehow the answer lies at the heart of the Conservative Party's failure on pipelines. It's shocking that the Conservatives can't tell the difference between a project that is facing provincial political interference and a project that a company withdrew based on its own market decision. Had it not been withdrawn by the proponent, our government would have used the same process to evaluate the Energy East pipeline that saw the Trans Mountain and Line 3 pipelines approved. Thousands of middle-class jobs are being created, Madam Speaker.
I'll remind the members that when somebody else has the floor, they should be listening, and then if they have other questions, they can get up to ask those. The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals nationalized the Kinder Morgan pipeline project using billions of taxpayer dollars, even though NDP protesters are still blocking access to construction sites and the BC government still wants to kill the project. But for Energy East, the Liberals didn't put any taxpayer dollars on the table, just roadblocks that no other project, including Trans Mountain, had to meet. As a result, Energy East was killed. Why are the Liberals picking winners and losers in our energy sector?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm proud to say that all of the East Coast MPs are on this side of the House, work very hard to ensure that we have all the information and provide that information back to their constituents. And as I said a moment ago, had the Energy East proposal not been withdrawn by the proponent, our government would have used the exact same process that saw both Trans Mountain expansion and Line 3 pipelines approved. Both of those projects, Madam Speaker, are creating good middle-class jobs for Canadians, growing the economy while protecting the environment. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, Madam Speaker, when the Liberals took office, there were 4 private sector pipelines that were viable, and now there are none. Crushing regulations, a tanker ban, anti-energy rhetoric, a carbon tax, and an unwillingness to assert the rule of law have chased the private sector out of Canada into other energy-producing places like Texas and Kazakhstan. With a track record of failure like this, how can these Liberals possibly rebuild investor confidence in Canadian energy industry? Good.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Natural Resources.
Madam Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the Conservatives on how to promote energy in this country. What we are doing is investing to protect thousands of jobs in Alberta, British Columbia, and indeed across the country. During 10 years, the Conservatives' rigid ideology failed to build pipelines to markets other than the United States and failed Canadian workers. When the Prime Minister went to Fort McMurray and met energy sector workers, he told them the government has their back. This is an investment in hardworking Canadians. Conservative might think is too risky to bet on Canadians. We don't.
The honourable member for Banff Airdrie.
Well, I remind the Liberals when they took office there was 4 viable private sector pipelines and now there's none. Plus the taxpayers are on the hook for $4.5 billion. The Liberals, in fact, are so committed to wasting taxpayers' money that they did this even though Kinder Morgan didn't ask for a single cent. And we're still not an inch closer to getting a pipeline built. The private sector's left. They're not interested in investing in our energy sector any longer. The Liberals are the ones who've driven them out. So how do they think anyone actually believes they're capable of getting a pipeline built?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we're taking a balanced approach to grow the economy and create jobs. The Harper Conservatives just couldn't get the balance right. Listen to what people are saying. We think obviously this is a very constructive for Canada and clearly for Canadian producers in particular because it creates a lot of regulatory certainty over the time that the Trans Mountain expansion can get done. Katie Boyes, an analyst with Height Securities in Washington. Alberta Premier Rachel Notley calls this a major step forward for Canadians. While it is a shame that the British Columbia government's antics have led to this, I'm very pleased to see the federal government has taken this step to get this vital pipeline built. Mayor Nenshi. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, Kinder Morgan wanted to invest $7.4 billion in Canada to build the Trans Mountain expansion. The Liberals had to enforce federal jurisdiction and give certainty. They didn't. Instead, the Prime Minister gave Kinder Morgan $4.5 billion to walk away, and he emboldened anti-energy activists to keep fighting the expansion. The Canadian Energy Pipeline Association said, quote, "We do not believe that this outcome will instill investor confidence in Canada." The Prime Minister failed Canadians. When will he start to champion private investment in Canadian energy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I have an excellent quote as well. Suncor CEO, I don't think I've ever had a higher degree of confidence that these pipelines will be built. The Conservatives continue to focus on ownership, and we will continue to focus on workers. Our approach is nothing new, Madam Speaker, even in Conservative circles. The great progressive Conservatives like Pierre Lougheed understood that public investment in our natural resources is important to help the industry grow and support Canadians. These Conservatives, however, will continue the ideological ways which failed Canadian energy workers for 10 years, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
But there are about 825,000 kilometres of pipeline in Canada, zero tax dollars needed. Under the Conservatives, nearly 8,000 kilometres of pipeline were built, zero tax dollars needed. The reality is this Prime Minister killed nearly 8,000 kilometres of pipeline already, hundreds of billions of private dollars gone. Now he's bought 1,100 kilometres of pipeline that was paid and built with private dollars 60 years ago. 4.5 billion tax dollars that will build pipelines in the U.S., and it will pay for an inch of new pipeline in Canada. Does the Prime Minister really believe that forcing taxpayers to cover his failures is a success?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Conservatives had 10 years to build a new pipeline to ship Canada's resources to new markets. They built zero. The Conservatives had 10 years to consult Indigenous and local communities. They ignored them. The Conservatives had 10 years to rally the country around the need for a new pipeline capacity to end the discount on landlocked Canadian crude. They didn't. The Conservatives had 10 years to address environmental concerns. They failed. We'll take no lessons from that party on how to champion resource projects. Thank you, Madam.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Since the Liberals announced they're buying Kinder Morgan's old pipeline, my phone has not stopped ringing. British Columbians are telling me they feel betrayed by this government, and they're dismayed that the Liberal priorities are so stuck in the past. And they're angry that the Prime Minister has given a Texas pipeline company a massive bailout by putting all the financial and environmental risks on Canadians. This is about the future of our country and the future of our planet. So tell me, what kind of climate leader buys bitumen pipelines?
Minister of Climate Change, of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have always said that a strong environment and a clean economy go together. We have a climate plan. We are following through on that climate plan, and the investment in the twinning of the Trans Mountain Pipeline fits within that climate plan. Why? Because the NDP government in Alberta has serious action on climate change. They put a price on pollution, they're phasing out coal, but they've also put the first ever hard cap on emissions in the oil sands. That is how this fits in our climate plan. Of course, we're doing more. We're making investments in...
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Madam Speaker, there are Indigenous children living in Canada in third world conditions. There are Indigenous communities where children are becoming sick because they do not have access to clean drinking water. But these children and helping these children does not appear to be a priority. The national interest appears to be the purchase of an old leaky pipe with $4.5 billion of our money. Is that really the national interest, Madam Speaker? The KM's pipeline has become the PM's pipeline. Is that the Liberal idea of a national vision for society?
Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition recently said they've done a great job in the past. Well, they've ignored Jordan's Principle, which was passed by Parliament in 2007, reviews calls for a national inquiry. We are focusing on forging a relationship based on a recognition of rights, respect, and cooperation and partnership. We will let a record stand. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Minister of Finance announced that Canada would be purchasing a pipeline for $4.5 billion. Like many Canadians, I was shocked because for months we have heard from Kinder Morgan that they only wanted the government to stand up for the rule of law and end the delays. The Liberals have failed to win the confidence of Kinder Morgan. Now Canadians are on the hook for billions of dollars to construct Trans Mountain. Under the Conservatives, investors had confidence to build Northern Gateway, Energy East, and the Trans Mountain pipelines. When will the Liberals start standing up for energy investment instead of making taxpayers pay for their failure?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will once again remind the official opposition that the Northern Gateway pipeline was thrown out by the courts for insufficient consultation with Indigenous peoples and communities. The Trans Mountain expansion project is in the national interest. It means thousands of jobs to strengthen and grow the middle class. The Conservatives, as I said, had 10 years to build pipelines to new export markets, and they couldn't get it done. They believe we have to make a choice between the environment and the economy. We don't. This is a country where it's possible to do both at the same time, and Madam Speaker, that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Madam Speaker, when the Liberals took office, there were 4 viable private sector pipelines. Now there are none. The private sector has left, taking over $100 billion in investments with them. The Liberals' mismanagement has driven them out, and now taxpayers have become the owners of a 60-year-old pipeline. With the announcement, the Prime Minister indicated he wanted construction to begin immediately. Simple question, what progress has been made on construction over the course of the last 3 days?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this is about getting our resources to new markets. So we are not only sending 98% of our oil exports to the U.S. And let's talk about the pipelines that have been approved. Many of them in Alberta, Madam Speaker, expanded export capacity for the Alberta Clipper, Nova Gas Pipeline, Line 3 replacement project, the Trans Mountain expansion. We support the Keystone XL. I could go on and on, Madam Speaker. This is about creating thousands of good middle-class jobs for Canadians while protecting the environment. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Beauport.
The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Madam Speaker, we are a few days away from the G7 summit and several public safety questions remain unanswered. Yesterday we learned that special constables have received no training in preparation for expected demonstrations and that border officers who will be working during the summit will not have their firearms, which is only supposed to happen when there is zero risk. Can the Public Safety Minister assure us that law enforcement officers will be adequately deployed during the G7?
Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Speaker. There has been meticulous preparations involving, of course, the RCMP and other national police and security agencies, but also all of the local and provincial authorities in Quebec. The cooperation and collaboration has been absolutely seamless, and the professionals in our police services, federally, provincially, and municipally, are determined to make sure that this event occurs successfully and safely.
L'honorable député de Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans.
The Honourable Member. Given that the security forces responsible for public safety during the G7 are not ready and do not have all the necessary equipment to deal with potential confrontation, and that this has been in the media, will the Liberals take responsibility, immediately deal with this worrisome situation, and reassure those affected by the G7 that they will be properly protected and compensated for any repercussions?
Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
Mr. Speaker, the public can have absolute confidence in the police and security agencies of both Canada and Quebec, and the local municipal authorities in the communities affected. The preparations have been thorough. The officials have been working on this for months and months and months to ensure that the Canadian public will be safe, that the attendees at the summit will be safe, and that this event can be conducted successfully and safely for all concerned.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Madam Speaker, the Auditor General has chastised this government for failing to address matters of significance to First Nations, in particular those living on reserves. In assessing well-being, he reports that they failed to consider health, environment, language, and culture, coupled with failed meaningful engagement. These are basic rights accorded under the UNDRIP and the UN Sustainable Development Goals this government professes to endorse. Why then did the Liberals oppose our amendments to Bills C-57 and C-69 intended to extend those very rights and duties?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Madam Speaker, our government welcomes the recommendation of the Auditor General on addressing outcome gaps on reserve dating back to 2001. Unlike the former government, which ripped up the Kelowna Accord and imposed top-down solutions on First Nations, we are making significant investments in health, education, housing, water, child and family services, and economic prosperity. We are working with First Nation partners on a national outcome-based framework and transformation on education and reserves. We will continue to work with First Nations to improve.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
This is the 8th anniversary of the passing of Shannon Coustache and the incredible youth leader who called out the systemic negligence of government towards First Nation children. And on this sad anniversary, the Auditor General has trashed this government's handling of education, calling it an incomprehensible failure. So I'd like to ask the Minister about the decision to falsify the graduation rates, that a 76% failure rate was covered up to protect the Minister's office. Why would they protect a culture of negligence rather than protecting the hopes and dreams of a generation of First Nation children?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Madam Speaker, we recognize that mental health challenges facing Indigenous people, particularly youth, are deep-rooted and complex. We recognize that implementation and delivery of our program and services must be driven by culture, strengths of the community. We have invested in 45 community-led mental health wellness teams serving 326 communities, up from 11 in 2015, and dedicated First Nation and Inuit hope and wellness lines. We will continue to work with First Nations and Inuit partners in collaboration with provinces, territories to advance targeted strategies to prevent the tragic loss of life. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Madam Speaker, the Government of Canada and Quebec recently agreed a bilateral agreement on early child care and learning. This is a significant stage for Canadian families because for the first time the federal government will have agreements with every province and territory to make child care more affordable Canada-wide. Can the Minister for Families, Children and Social Development give us more details? The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd first of all like to thank the Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville for his considerable work on affordable childcare. I'm happy to inform you that we have signed an agreement with the Quebec government which completes our suite of agreements with all provinces and territories. This is an important stage in reducing poverty, and we're giving all children in our country equal footing, equal opportunities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon-Grasswood.
Madam Speaker, once again we see this Liberal Prime Minister change the rules halfway through the game. Their campaign promise to reform our electoral system failed, so they're doing the next best thing, Madam Speaker, to favour their election prospects by refusing to ban ministerial travel and advertising during the entire pre-election period. The Liberals are simply trying to buy themselves the next election. Can the Prime Minister stop abusing democracy and put Canadians ahead of the Liberal Party?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Speaker, while such a charge may make good theatre, it's simply not true. Canadians were fed up with tax dollars being wasted blatantly on partisan ads by the previous government. That's why we moved quickly in 2016 to ban partisan government ads and establish third-party oversight. We also banned government advertising in the 90-day period to precede the fixed date election period as well as for any other government program that has yet to be approved by Parliament. And by focusing on government advertising on Canadians' needs instead of on partisan objectives like the previous government, we've been able to cut off the government's advertising budget by almost a half.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Why is this government trying to prevent communication with the public through advertising for political parties in the pre-electoral period. Why limit the right to communicate with Canadians? What is this Liberal government afraid of? Why are Liberals trying to muzzle politicians who have ideas and platforms that are different from this destructive Liberal government? Is this democratic to take away the right to speak? Is this the new Liberal way of doing politics? Canadians don't want money wasted, didn't like seeing money wasted on the partisan spending of the former government. That is why in 2016 we prohibited publicity.
Which we... Bilingual, Madam Speaker, if you don't mind. Fixed date election and for any government program that has yet to be approved by Parliament.
Concentrating on the need of Canadians rather than partisan objectives.
Madam Speaker, at Finance Committee this week, every single Liberal MP voted against looking at the punishing new stress test they introduced on mortgages without even saying a single word. As many as 100,000 Canadians could be blocked from purchasing a home. Up to 150,000 Canadians could lose their jobs because of this economic slowdown. Will the Finance Minister do the right thing, ignore his mute Liberal MPs, and commit to a full review of these new mortgage rules?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
You know that for the vast majority of Canadians, of middle-class Canadians, their home is their most important investment, and it's the most important they'll make in their lifetime, and critical to their financial well-being that this investment be protected. We've taken steps to address pockets of risk and ensure a healthy, dynamic housing market, and we're working with provincial, municipal counterparts to gather data, monitor the situation, and make sure to protect the middle class in Canada. Thank you.
Bravo, bravo. The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Madam Speaker, the new mortgage rules of the Liberal government are impacting all parts of the country and are making the purchase and sale of housing almost impossible for many Canadians. These changes were supposed to calm the overheated housing markets in Toronto and Vancouver, but instead of that, the real estate market, dropped by 20% and posted the worst sales since 2001. Will the Finance Minister admit that these changes to the rules are hurting Canadians? These are simply Ottawa knows best directives. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, we know that investment in housing is one of the most important investments a Canadian can make, and we want to make sure that the investments of middle-class Canadians are protected. We will be following this situation closely with our provincial and municipal partners in order to protect the interests of the middle class and the real estate market. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, the first pay equity court case launched by Labour against Canada Post was 35 years ago. Today, CUPW earned a long-awaited victory in favour of pay equity for rural and suburban mail carriers, two-thirds of whom are women. It's a disgrace that this Liberal government says it is committed to pay equity, but we've seen no legislation and not a dime in the budget to back empty Liberal promises. We're tired of waiting, Madam Speaker. When will we see action?
The Honourable Minister of Employment, Workforce and Development.
Equal pay for work of equal value. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to be part of a government that knows that work of equal value deserves equal pay. And, you know, I really love the fact that my colleagues agree with me. And, in fact, in Budget 2018, we made the commitment to introduce proactive pay equity legislation, and that's exactly what we'll be doing. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Madam Speaker, when the federal government unveiled its national housing strategy last November, it did not include an Indigenous housing strategy, despite the fact that 87% of Indigenous peoples in Canada do not live on reserve and face almost 10 times the risk of housing insecurity and homelessness. An Indigenous housing strategy, Madam Speaker, cannot be an afterthought. Can the minister tell us Where is the comprehensive strategy that addresses the housing needs of Indigenous peoples?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Madam Speaker, our government remains committed to co-developing a distinction-based Indigenous housing strategy with our First Nation, Inuit, and Métis partners. That is why Budget 2018 invests $600 million over 3 years in First Nation housing, $500 million over 10 years for Métis housing, $400 million over 10 years for Inuit housing. This funding is a significant step towards addressing the housing needs in Indigenous communities. Our government is committed to closing the unacceptable housing gap for Indigenous people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Carleton Trail Eagle Creek.
Madam Speaker, farming can be stressful, whether it's the weather, transportation issues, or the Liberal government raising their taxes. Farmers have a lot to deal with. So when the Ag Minister stated that most farmers support a tax on carbon, I know his ridiculous statement got more than a few laughs across my riding. What evidence does the Minister have for his claim that farmers support his carbon tax, and could he please let them know how much it will cost them?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Again, to stand up and talk about our approach to climate action. We work with everyone. We work with farmers. We work with business people. We work with environmentalists. We work with provinces and territories. We work with cities. I'm as much the Minister of Environment for farmers as I am for environmentalists. And as we've always said, pricing pollution is already happening. 80% of Canadians have a price on pollution through the leadership of the provinces. The past government did nothing for a decade. But we are working with the provinces and territories, and we're working with everyone together. But the question I ask is, what is the Conservatives' plan?
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Recently, the Minister of Agriculture stated that the majority of Canadian farmers support the Liberal carbon tax. He obviously has not been to the riding of Elgin, Middlesex, London, filled with farmers. Farmers throughout southwestern Ontario are concerned about their increased input costs. These families are the stewards of our land and are using cutting-edge technology to reduce their own emissions. Yes. I would like to ask the Minister of Agriculture, is he willing to stand up and oppose this carbon tax on hard-working Canadian farmers and their families?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Willing to step up for everyone in Canada, because we're all in this together. We all need to take action to tackle climate change. In fact, I was really pleased to see the Leader of the Opposition who said he is going to meet our Paris Agreement targets, because that's good. We all know we need to do this. But we have a plan. We've been very clear about how our plan will tackle climate change, will grow our economy. What Canadians really want to know, what my kids want to know, what future generations want to know, is what is the plan of the Conservative government.
I'll just remind the member for Carleton Trail Eagle Creek that when somebody else has the floor, that person deserves the respect to be heard, just like she had the opportunity to be heard when she asked her question. The honourable member for Oshawa.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister has known about American tariffs for months. He instead chose to focus on luxury vacations and photo ops while ignoring the future of Canadian workers. Rather than working with Canadian companies to keep them competitive, the Prime Minister is forcing a punitive carbon tax and new payroll taxes on Canadian manufacturers, which American competitors will not have to pay. Will the Prime Minister work to keep well-paying jobs in Canada and give Canadian manufacturers a chance to stay competitive by dropping his unfair carbon tax?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation and Science.
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister has already stated a number of times in this House, we firmly disagree with the illegal and inappropriate American tariffs, and we are working as a government with all Canadians behind us to fight this unnecessary and illegal measure with all means we have at our disposal. With respect to the manufacturing industry, with respect to steel and aluminum and other industries affected by this tariff, Mr. Speaker, our government has invested massively in innovation. We are working with stakeholders across Canada through this particular Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development to make sure that we move forward.
The honourable member for Cloverdale, Langley City.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Speaker, Canadians know that our two official languages constitute a strength, which is particularly true in my riding of Cloverdale, Langley City. Recently, I had the opportunity to meet with the Francophone community in British Columbia in order to explain the positive impact of the upcoming Action Plan for Official Languages. Can the Minister of Canadian Heritage please update this House on her work implementing the Official Languages Action Plan? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Cloverdale-Langley City for his question and his excellent French. After years of indifference and inaction, we are acting. We announced the biggest investment in the history of official languages, $2.7 billion, and we have announced recently that we will increase by 20% all those organizations that were frozen during the Harper regime. So it can be education, infrastructure, etc. We're acting.
Madam Speaker, veterans have been asking for the return of the NDI 75 identification card. The NDI 75 is an ID card that many veterans and their families feel recognizes and appreciates the values and sacrifices made by the members of our armed forces and helps in their transition to civilian life. Veterans want this card back, so I'm asking on behalf of Canadian veterans, will the minister bring this card or something like it back?
Comment for Secretary of the Ministry of Veterans Affairs.
Madam Speaker, we know that former members of the Canadian Armed Forces want a tangible way to identify themselves as veterans. We are exploring options with the Department of National Defence to develop a Veterans Identification Card that will be an official Government of Canada ID card for veterans. More information regarding the project will be available in the coming months, and I'm delighted to be wearing red today on Red Fridays in support of our Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you.
The honourable member for Ottawa South.
Madam Speaker, this week is Victims and Survivors of Crime Week. Our government is committed to strengthening victims' rights within the military justice system. And this week we heard from the Auditor General on the previous government's neglect of not only the military, but also the military justice system, which is an important part of military discipline and morale. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence inform this House how we are committed to ensuring both the efficiency of the military justice system and that the rights of victims are fully respected?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, during this week, Victims and Survivors, we reiterate our determination to strengthen victims' rights in our military justice system. With C-76, we will have a declaration of the rights of victims in the Code.
To incorporate Indigenous consideration, something the previous Conservative government had neglected to include.
The honourable member for Edmonton Banning.
Government, we have seen billions of dollars of investment leave Canada due to their failed economic policies. Whether it is increased payroll taxes, the carbon tax, or stifling red tape, Canadian businesses are finding it increasingly difficult to compete. Given the trade dispute with the U.S. announced yesterday, will the Liberals commit to exempting Canadian companies competing south of the border from these punitive taxes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
This government that has created 600,000 jobs, most of them full-time, since we took office 2.5 years ago. Madam Speaker, as a government, we will continue to strongly defend and support Canadian workers and producers in not only steel and aluminum, but across Canada in a variety of different industries. We're taking action, Madam Speaker, to support vital innovation, to create new business opportunities through supporting innovation and steel-related research, aluminum-related research, and improving environmentally sound energy products.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, for the TMX pipeline to go forward, the government has pledged to assume all risks. If the project contravenes provincial legislation, Ottawa pays. If the federal government doesn't have the jurisdiction to shove TMX down the public's throats, Ottawa pays. If the proponent is late, Ottawa pays. If the proponent reneges, Ottawa pays once again and buys back the pipeline. It's the private sector that's pocketing the money and the federal government assuming the risks. Can the minister tell us how much this will cost Quebecers? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have an agreement with Kinder Morgan and its twinning with Kinder Morgan and its twinning with Trans Mountain. We believe that this project will generate monies that will benefit Canadians in Alberta, British Columbia, and Quebec. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Madam Speaker, we know about the critical role of bees in biodiversity, but they are being decimated by a kind of insecticide called neonicotinoid. 233 scientists from all over the world have asked that these products be prohibited. The government has maintained the use of these the most widespread in this category, and they are rather starting consultations. 233 researchers from 34 countries. Isn't this enough of a consultation? Will the government not listen to scientists rather than chemical sellers? Madam Speaker, we take these pesticides seriously, and at the present time, we have undertaken a scientific review, and we're looking at reducing risks for bees. This is a concern that we have when we realize that exposure to neonicotinoids is a problem. We will take all necessary measures to deal with this issue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for La Pointe-de-L'Île. Madam Speaker, the Canadian government set up the Infrastructure Bank in Toronto rather than Montreal, and this against the will of the government and business people of Quebec. For the 6 months of its existence, the Infrastructure Bank is offering its services in English only. With a starting budget of $35 billion, it's impossible to speak French, even with a receptionist. This is the price to be paid for being in Canada. Will the minister responsible for official languages finally wake up and act? Really act. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. Madam Speaker, our two official languages are at the very heart of our identity, and the bank has to respect its obligations under the Official Languages Act. But Claire Lavallée is the first CEO of the bank. She has all the skills and requirements necessary. And this is we will watch to see what CEO Lavallée has to say, and we know that both official languages will be respected.
Well, that's the end of question period. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 36(8), I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's response to 12 petitions.
Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Rapport de délégation interparlementaire.
Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Mr. McGuinty.
L'honorable député d'Ottawa Sud.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa South.
Madam Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 34(1), I have the honour to present to the House in both official languages 2 reports of the Canadian Group of the Interparliamentary Union respecting its participation at the IPU parliamentary hearing on the occasion of the 62nd session of the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, United States on March 3, 2018, and at the 138th Assembly of the IPU and related meetings in Geneva, Switzerland